Morse code of weather time. You're talking about climate classification today, Jacob.
Yeah, it's maybe something you don't think about every day, but climate is what we expect, weather is what we get. So climate is kind of what our entire globe is defined by, and there's different zones that experience wildly different temperature variations, and there's a classification system to define all those different zones called the Köppen climate classification system. Categorizes climate zones throughout the world based on local vegetation. It was developed by Vladimir Köppen. He lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Russian, German geographer, meteorologist, climatologist, published his first climate zones map in 1884. But the system that we know today was developed around 1900, with the final version being released in 1936. So here's that Köppen climate classification map, where you see the Sahara Desert, a dry climate zone, obviously, where we have tropical regions like in the Amazon rainforest in South America. That's a tropical climate classification zone, like in Central Africa and over towards Indonesia, whereas you have dry zone in portions of Central Asia. You have the snow, the polar regions closer towards the North Pole. Now, there's a bunch of different classifications here dictated by 2 or 3 different letters, and those letters go either tropical, dry, mild temperate, snow polar, and then you have all of these different sub-classifications to put them into. We'll break it down here for you and kind of focus locally first on the entire lower 48, where we're looking at the normal amount of precipitation for an entire year. And closer to the Gulf of Mexico, they get a lot more rain than we do here in the northern plains and over towards the western U.S. And remember, this is a climate classification zone based on local vegetation. So the precipitation plays a role in how much vegetation there is on the ground. And this is what that classification looks like across the United States. Across the south central and southeast, warm, temperate climate, fully humid with hot summers. For the northern tier of the country, for the central and eastern portions, snow in the winter, fully humid, and a warmer summer. But then once you get closer to the Rocky Mountains, and this impacts portions of western North Dakota, that's called the cold, arid climate classification zone. Arid meaning a little bit more dry, and of course that colder feature that we see here in the northern plains. Focusing just on North Dakota, the humid continental classification is for most of the state, whereas we have semi-arid for that far western part of the region. And again, we have to tie it back to our normal amount of precipitation that we see throughout an entire year. Across western North Dakota, it's 16 to 18 inches, even less than 16 inches in portions of far western North Dakota, whereas closer towards the Red River Valley, they see 20 to 24 or even more inches of rain throughout an entire year. And that plays a factor, or plays a role into what soil looks like across the region and impacts what we farm, or what kind of agriculture we see across North Dakota, where we have the most fertile soil in the Red River Valley, where you have the most precipitation. The ground becomes more clay, sand, and gravel types in the drift prairie towards central and the central North Dakota and the James River Valley. Then you get more so towards the Badlands and the Missouri slope of southwest North Dakota, where you have a little bit more clay in the ground. More livestock grazing takes place there compared to the crops that are grown elsewhere. So again, we have the humid continental, that's the classification zone for most of North Dakota, whereas we have the semi-arid classification for the west. And what's the difference between the two? Well, all of us in North Dakota see all 4 seasons. Of course, there's extremes from the summer to the winter. And most of North Dakota, with that humid continental classification, warm to hot, somewhat humid summers, and then we have our cold and windy winters. But in the west, with that semi-arid classification, less precipitation, as I've talked about, less humidity as well, and that generally leads to a larger diurnal temperature difference. Diurnal range is your high temperature and your low temperature, the difference between the two. And when you have a larger diurnal temperature swing from your lows to your highs, that's seen a lot more across western North Dakota. The higher elevation in the far southwest also kind of plays a role into this. White Butte at 3,500 feet compared to far northeastern North Dakota, the lowest elevation in the state at only 750 feet above sea level. So the diurnal range, here's an example from this past weekend. Sunday's lows were the coldest in southwest North Dakota, where we had lower humidity that can allow temperatures to drop off a lot more at night. It was 21 on Sunday morning in Henniger. Skip ahead to Monday afternoon, we had the warmest high temperatures in southwest North Dakota once again. So you see that larger diurnal spread in temperatures from your lows to your highs. In the southwest, you can kind of think of it like you're going from a lower low to a higher high, more extremes in the southwest compared to other parts of the state. Here's an example. Let's go from Dickinson to Grand Forks. In January, normal max temperature and normal minimum temperature. Grand Forks is colder than Dickinson, but that diurnal range is larger in Dickinson than it is in Grand Forks. In the summertime, similar story. Normal max temperature minus normal minimum temperature. We get a larger diurnal range in Dickinson, 29 degrees between that max and min compared to 24 in Grand Forks. And notice that Dickinson is usually a bit warmer than eastern North Dakota as well. It can sometimes be referred to as the banana belt of North Dakota, and that's any segment of a larger geographic region that enjoys warmer weather conditions than the region as a whole, especially in the wintertime, and that's the case across southwest North Dakota. Some other examples of banana belts are near Rapid City, east of the Black Hills, and the Front Range of the Rockies in Colorado. All of these have a similarity, is that they see downsloping winds. Here in southwest North Dakota, you get west winds that downslope off the Rockies and the higher elevations of Montana and Wyoming, leading to that warmer temperature area in southwest North Dakota, usually less snow cover in the winter and less humidity, especially in the summertime. Those downsloping winds meaning that you go from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. Here locally it's a west wind that would be downsloping and warming as it descends from that higher elevation down into the lower elevation. So interesting how the different parts of North Dakota see different types of weather and how we can classify those as different climate zones.
The banana belt is the place to be, I'm telling you.
You and Kevin have said before, let's take a road trip to
Yes,
Henniger or Bowman
absolutely,
and
yes.
experience that banana belt in the wintertime.